when Coroner Jean-Pierre Rivard adjourned his inquiry into the murders of Raymond Grimard and Manon Bergeron and Carole Fecteau on October 16th, 1978, police were still without a cooperative witness that would confirm their version of the darkness that transpired in late June and early July 78. 3 weeks later, they would have their compliant witness. On November 10th, 78, someone attempted to set fire to the Aloha Motel in Rock Forest. You'll recall Rock Forest is a bedroom community to the west of Sherbrooke. 5 years later, it would become the setting for another motel drama, tragedy, the massacre of 2 carpet layers by police at the Motel Chatillion. Tragedy was averted in the Aloha Motel fire. The Sûreté du Quebec just happened to be across the street before the blaze was ignited. Police immediately arrested a 19-year-old suspect leaving the scene of the attempted arson, Jean Charland. Welcome to the world of Sherbrooke, subterfuge, aka Shittown, where even the police play a part in the underhanded shenanigans. This is Who Killed Teresa. Charland pleaded not guilty and opted for a trial by judge and jury. Police tagged on charges of impaired driving and a hit and run. Agents from the Sûreté du Quebec reportedly saw Charland heading towards the motel located at 5790 Bourque Boulevard. Bourque Boulevard is really just an extension of King Street, which in itself is Highway 112. So Charland was heading to the motel with 2 cans in his hands. In one of the rooms, police discovered a lighted candle and 2 cans containing gasoline. Charland was apprehended and the investigation was handed over to Raël Chateauneuf, who just happened to be also assigned to the cases of Raymond Grimard, Manon Bergeron, Carole Fecteau, the same agent who had followed the bank heisters to Hatley just prior to the Grimard-Bergeron murders. Imagine that. What we know about the events would eventually come out in the trial of Ferdinand Laplante, set for January 1979, but subsequently postponed until that spring. I'm jumping ahead here because it's important to know that these events played out over the weekend of November 10th, 1978, during the time that Teresa Allure went missing, and her story was first reported in local newspapers. In fact, I believe it was November 11th, the next day, that the first notice appeared in the French newspapers. So to begin with, Jean Charland was like an arsonist of herostratic proportions well before the Aloha Motel incident. He was accustomed to receiving payments for contracts to burn down buildings where the owners or the mob that controlled them wished to liquidate the business and cut and run with the insurance proceeds. Charland was suspected of setting a fire at a Wellington Street hotel. He may have played a part in the October 78 blaze at the Ripple Cove Inn in Ayers Cliff that killed 12 guests. So I have no problem believing Jean Charland accepted a contract to burn down the Aloha Motel. That's not the issue. The question is, who put out the contract? Was it the owner, Paul Bergeron, as the police would have you believe, or was it someone who had a specific interest in setting up Jean Charland so he would testify against Fernand Laplante? To put a blunt point on the question, did the Sûreté du Quebec, through an intermediary, put out a contract on the Aloha Motel? Because it damn well looks like it. In the aftermath of the Aloha Motel fire, Charland was effectively put under house arrest, confined to his, if you can't believe, confined to his parents' home, and ordered to obey a 1 o'clock curfew. Judge Yvon Roberge required that the 19-year-old meet every Thursday with Agent Réal Chateauneuf. In other words, Charland was to meet weekly with the Sûreté du Quebec every week for 6 months until he finally got his story straight. If the Quebec legal system had shown this level of concern when Charland was merely a petty criminal, there might never have been 3 murders committed in 1978 Sherbrooke. And it's important to note here that Jean Charland, too, was set to stand trial as a co-conspirator in the 3 1978 summer murders. But where Laplante was clamped down, Charland was allowed to walk free and roam the streets of Sherbrooke, doing as he willed, drug dealing, setting fires, and getting shot at. And we'll get to that one later. At the trial in April 1979, even though he testified against Laplante, Charland equally admitted that he believed the police had set him up to perform, in his words, the arson contract on November 10th at the Motel Aloha, the purpose of which was to make me talk. In fact, Charland only made a statement incriminating Fernand Laplante in the murder of Carol Fecteau on November 11th, the day after the Aloha fire. Charland pointed out that he found it curious that the police arrested him at the scene, and he believed, in his words, in that moment, and I still think today, that it was a frame-up to get me talking. A little history here. If a business was paying out through drug distribution or money laundering, there was no need to do anything. But if a business was dying or bled dry, better to take a one-time insurance cash and burn the place down. Sometimes this was for revenge or to take out a competitor. Arson could also be very complicated, sometimes involving the darker side of municipal redevelopment and urban renewal. In the late 1970s, arson was a tool of choice in the township's underworld. In January 1977, the Lantern Inn in Georgeville, Quebec, was destroyed by flames, but its popular nightclub, the discotheque La Poupée, survived, only to be burned to the ground 3 years later. Later that fall, someone set fire to Martin Furrier's on Rue Frontenac in a blaze initially thought to be connected to the Charles Marion kidnapping. 1978 saw the Ripple Cove Inn fire in Ayers Cliff. Arson was again suspected in a February 1979 blaze that razed the Royal Hotel at the corner of Belvedere and Minto across from the Armory. Then in April 1st, fire destroyed the Woolworths building at 79 Wellington North. In mid-April, the Sherbrooke Fire Department reported that 1978 was the worst year for fires in the city's history. Material losses rose from $900,000 in 1977 to $2.5 million in 1978. 437 fires were reported in the city, with per capita losses costing each of Sherbrooke's 86,000 residents $29. By the end of the summer of 1979, police finally managed to catch a bona fide serial arsonist. Patrick Barron was charged with second-degree murder for a fire that killed 2 women including his 19-year-old girlfriend. Barron admitted to setting fires in Montreal and Sherbrooke while out on leave from the Pinel Psychiatric Institute. That's just a side note. It's nothing germane to this. In addition to the Aloha fire in April 1979, Jean Charland was suspected of setting a fire at a janitorial building at 83 Wellington Street South. Then later that June, he did it again, igniting a blaze in the neighboring building at 79 Wellington Street South. For this job, Charland had a partner, Mario Valguiers. Yeah, the same guy that was the drug supplier for Charland and Grimard. They received $2,000 to burn down a unit that housed 9 apartments, a grocery store, and a sex shop. At the time of these fires, Charland was preparing, then had just completed being the Crown's star witness in the trial of Fernand Laplante, and was under special protection by the Sûreté du Quebec. So apparently you could continue to break the law just so long as local police provided justice for crimes of their choosing. And for those who've been following along, I've added the location of these fires to our Google map, which you can find on the website teresaallore.com. It's TheresaAllore.com. What came out at trial was something not revealed at the time of the Aloha Motel fire. Jean Charland had a partner in the arson plot. This was a man who, at the time, the Sûreté du Quebec desperately wished to remain anonymous. Even today, I suspect parties in this whole affair would prefer that I not identify him. So I'm gonna identify him. His name is Régis Lachance, and this is what he told the court on May 2nd, 1979. 43-year-old Régis Lachance had a prior criminal record with convictions for gross indecency, fraud, theft, and breaking and entering. He said he had taken a contract to set the Aloha Motel fire from someone named Carrier, who he had seen only 2 or 3 times. Now, this would be 25-year-old Normand Carrier, who would eventually get 6 months for setting a fire in an apartment building belonging to Mr. Orphir Faneuf. Faneuf committing the offense of not renting a unit to Carrier's girlfriend. Lachance said he was to be paid a total of $5,000 after the job was completed and received $2,500 in advance. Lachance accompanied Charland, who he had hired to do the job, first to a gas station to purchase gas, and then to a brasserie near Woolco, a shopping center, where they had a few beers before proceeding to the Aloha around 9:30 p.m. For those of you keeping score, yes, this is the same Woolco where in 1983 police found a vehicle containing a shotgun and discarded clothing, which eventually led to the whole cock-up at the Motel Chatillion. Charland was driving a car belonging to Régis Lachance's sister. Lachance testified that he didn't ride with Charland because I was afraid of him and he was pretty full of beer too. I'm having a hard time understanding why a 43-year-old man would be scared of a 19-year-old kid, but let's continue. Lachance explained that he instead took a taxi to the motel. He entered the motel bar and proceeded down the passageway to Unit 3, which he had rented earlier that day. He found Charland in the room, and when everything was ready and a candle was lit and placed near some gas, he again left the way he had come in. Charland went out the outside door, and as we've seen with the Rock Forest affair, this style of motel had a dual entrance. Charland was arrested immediately by officers Daniel Hebert and Réal Chateauneuf, who cocked a 12-gauge shotgun in his face. Charland appeared bemused and visibly drunk. Lachance claimed he had seen a tow truck taking his sister's car down the highway as he stood hitchhiking from the Aloha. He followed it to a garage where he was informed that the police had taken possession of it at the scene of the crime. You don't have a tow truck at the ready unless the entire operation was preordained. Lachance was never questioned by police for his part in the motel fire, nor did the mysterious Carrier ask for his $25,000 advance back, which Lachance claimed to have already spent. He denied knowing the whole thing was set up by the police to get Charland, while admitting he was practically friends with the arson investigator, Agent Plourde. In fact, Lachance seemed to be on good speaking terms with many members of the Sûreté du Quebec. At the SQ headquarters, Jean Charland gave a simple statement to Officer Réal Chateauneuf about the Aloha case. Chateauneuf then turned matters and asked Charland why he had retracted a statement given to the coroner on August 23rd concerning the death of Carole Facteau. Wait a minute. This is now about Facteau? How'd that happen? Charland refused to answer. It was close to midnight, and at this point the officers ordered lunch for Charland, consisting of fried chicken and 3 pints of beer. The chicken, no doubt, supplied by Pat's KFC, just down the street from the police HQ. Recall that both Regis Lachance and arresting officers said that Charland was already visibly drunk from the beers at the Woolco Brasserie. After lunch, Chateauneuf then asked Charland if he knew anything about the murders of Raymond Grimard and Manon Bergeron, and then offered the young man police protection in exchange for his statement. Charland had already been shot at a number of times around King and Wellington in the months after the murders. Someone in the underworld was apparently attempting to silence him. So at this point, police used the word bargain to imply Charland would be protected in exchange for a cooperating statement. At approximately 2 a.m, November 11th, 1978, Jean Charland wrote his statement incriminating Fernand Laplante for the murders of Grimard, Bergeron, and Carole Facteau. Securing false statements from a witness under hours of interrogation while drunk and offering false bargains of protection may be something covered under the Reed technique, but it's never been proven as an effective technique to extract a confession under any scientific scrutiny. If the role of a police investigator is to, well, actually fucking investigate, then why not try that? So what did Charland say happened? If you're thinking that it's odd that we're at this point in our story, we're 5 months into the actual story, we're 4 chapters into this tale, and we still don't know exactly what happened to our 3 victims, you're right. It's odd. It's really fucking odd. And a gentle reminder here, while local police were, quote, still wondering about the fate of Teresa Lohr on November 14th, 1978, Jean Charland and Regis Lachance, two criminals with many prior convictions, were on the loose and left to their own devices all through the month of November. During Therese's disappearance on November 3rd, right up to Charland's arrest on November 10th. And even after that, Charland was ordered to stay with his parents, and Lachance remained free. He was never charged with anything in connection to the Aloha Motel fire, even though it was clearly Lachance who rented unit number 3. Recall that the guy police pegged as a suspect number 1 in all of this, Fernand Laplante, was at this time in prison serving a 1-year sentence for contempt of court. So Laplante clearly had nothing to do with Therese Allor's disappearance or the motel fire. Why did a guy like Regis Lachance, a career criminal, get to walk away scot-free from the scene of an arson? Unless he was working for the police. I'll add here that by now I'm sure all of this sounds a little Looney Tunes, the product of an overactive imagination. Consider this. Everything I've told you this far is backed up with evidence by then defense attorney Jean-Pierre Rancourt, the private investigator from that era named Robert Bulak, and today's Sûreté du Quebec cold case investigators. We'll get there. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In September 1979, the owner of the Aloha Motel, Paul Bergeron, filed a $300,000 civil claim against officers from the Estrie district of the Sûreté du Quebec for arrest without a warrant, illegal detention, and mistreatment suffered on November 10th, 1978, as well as for humiliation, loss of profits, and the forced sale of his motel. Réal Chateauneuf was not named in the suit, which included Sergeants Pierre Marceau and Agents Daniel Hubert, Robert Lauzon, and Guy Lessard, all officers with hands in the Aloha case, as well as the summer murders of Grimard, Bergeron, and Fecteau. In the legal action, Bergeron detailed how he bought the Aloha Motel in 1967, how on the evening of November 10th, 1978, he was arrested by Officer Hubert, who took him to room number 3, where the fire had started. There he was met by 6 or 7 SQ officers who accused him of being complicit in the arson, one of them stating, "You have been dying for long enough, but you have gone too far." Bergeron was taken to the headquarters of the SQ on Don Bosco, detained and interrogated in a small office. He alleged that the police insisted on asking him, "How much did you pay to burn down your motel?" According to Bergeron, Sergeant Marceau, who was leading the interrogation, told him, "Paul, you might as well admit it. We saw the gas and the candles in the room." He mentioned to the officer that he had rented number 3 to an elderly person in his 50s, that would be Regis Lachance, who claimed that the heating system in his residence was defective. According to Bergeron, Sergeant Marceau insisted to him, "Say that you rented to a young person." That would be Charland, which Bergeron refused to do. So if the SQ was capable of such witness tampering, it's easy to now imagine them strong-arming Hélène La Rochelle into saying her roommate Carol Fecteau was scared of a Claire and Fern. You'll recall that from the coroner inquiry. So it was at this point that officers began to beat Paul Bergeron. He received blows and slaps on each side of his head from his interrogator. Sergeant Marceau repeated to him, "You are going to speak," and continued to hit him in the head and the face. This assault continued with officers pulling his hair and slamming his face into the cell wall. Bergeron pointed out that Constable Guy Lessard witnessed the scene and encouraged his colleague. Lessard would soon become one of the officers investigating Teresa Lore's murder. According to Bergeron, Agent Lessard explained to him that they weren't trying to frame him, but wanted to get details because he was a victim. Bergeron added that he was locked in a cell, though charged with no crime, and the officers continued to beat him to the ground and trample him, all the while drinking beer and playing with their guns and cards. After a 6-hour interrogation, Sergeant Marceau told Bergeron, "We are good guys, but others will arrive later and they may not be as good." Marceau then said that his insurance would be canceled, that an uninsured motel was without value. In January 1981, the Quebec Police Commission held a public inquiry into the conduct of Sergeant Pierre Marceau, as well as officers Guy Lessard and Robert Lauzon of the Sûreté du Quebec. Agent Réal Chateauneuf then joined the fray and attempted to discredit Bergeron, now claiming that on the night of November 10th, he was drunk, staggering slightly, and had a hesitant step. At the conclusion of this inquiry in 1982, Sergeant Pierre Marceau and Constable Robert Lauzon were ordered to pay $7,500 in restitution to Paul Bergeron. Also implicated in the case was Quebec Justice Minister Marc-André Bedard, who on behalf of the government was ordered to share the cost of the restitution, which was nowhere near Bergeron's original lawsuit for $300,000. Paul Bergeron was eventually forced to sell the Aloha Motel due to his financial difficulties. It's worth noting that by this time, the incident at the Rock Forest Motel was nearly a year away. The owner of the Chatillion Motel in that affair would also go bankrupt due to police fuckery. What was missing in the reporting on Paul Bergeron's legal action against the Sûreté du Quebec was any mention of the men who attempted to set the fire at the Aloha Motel, Régis Lachance and Jean Charland. Without that information, the public could never connect that Bergeron's suit was one more example of the police's attempt to fabricate a narrative in the miscarriage of justice against Fernand Laplante. When you add up the evidence, the beating and harassment of Bergeron, the coercion of a confession from Charland by getting him drunk, and the frame-up for the arson, the use of Régis Lachance as a willing rube in the scheme, it all points to a police force desperate to convict a man at any cost. But the public never saw this. They were never provided the tools to decide for themselves. 1982 was a long way from 1978. After winning their fourth consecutive Stanley Cup in 1978-79, in 1982, the Montreal Canadiens were eliminated in the first round by the Quebec Nordiques. By 1982, René Lévesque and the Parti Québécois had largely abandoned their sovereigntist roots. ABBA, Blondie, the Doobie Brothers, the Jam, the Knack, the Sweet, all called it quits in 1982. By this time, even I was a long way from Quebec, preparing to enter my first year of college in Ontario. When Paul Bergeron was finally awarded $7,500, all the facts had been trampled underfoot in a rush to judgment. All the important details were forgotten. Now, when I say this was a miscarriage of justice, ultimately, A miscarriage of justice against who? Next time, the trial of Fernand Laplante. This is Who Killed Teresa. You too, junior detectives. The Who Killed Teresa squad need to catalog this information. You need to track it. The Aloha Motel fire episode is probably the most critical thing that needs to be understood and placed in the context of everything we're talking about. So note it, track it as we move forward. If you like the podcast, you can follow us on social media. Go to the website, theresaallure.com, theresaallore.com, and you can find links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Substack, where we have the newsletter, all of those good fun things to make your day more enjoyable. I think that's all for today. I'm going to peace out. This has been Who Killed Teresa. I'm your host, John Allure. Have yourselves a great, great day.